The gentle hum of the air conditioning in my office was very different from the storm of thoughts in my head. My name is Anna, and I'm a 28-year-old lawyer. My life now is very different from my chaotic childhood, which I keep hidden even from my closest friends. The quiet of my office was broken by the ringing of my phone. It was an unknown number, but it felt strangely familiar. I picked up the phone with a nervous hand. "Speaking," I said, trying to sound professional and careful. "Anna, it's your father," said the voice. There was a nervousness in his voice that made me feel uneasy. A chill ran through me. It had been over 10 years since I last heard that voice. A voice that used to mean safety and love but now symbolized betrayal and pain. "Why are you calling me?" I asked, my voice sharp as it cut through the silence after he introduced himself. "I'm in trouble, Anna. I need your help with money," he said, his voice cracking a little. Even though he might have been sincere, his request made me feel angry and resentful. "You need my help now, after all these years?" I replied, feeling a mix of disbelief and anger. "Yes, I wouldn't ask if it wasn't serious." "I'm really in a tough spot," he continued, sounding more desperate. "You stopped being my father a long time ago. You can't just call me now and expect me to help," I said firmly, my voice cold and steady. There was a long pause on the line, filled with a heavy silence that felt like a huge, unbridgeable gap between us. "Anna, please. I'm still your dad," he said, trying weakly to reconnect with me. The word dad felt strange and almost shocking. "A dad? You lost that title when you chose her over me," I replied, my words filled with years of buried anger and hurt. "You're my daughter. I thought," he began, sounding both pleading and desperate. "You thought wrong," I interrupted, cutting him off. "You made your choice years ago, and now I've made mine." "Anna, I am sorry. I just need this one favor," he said. The word sorry echoed in my office, sounding empty and meaningless. "Sorry doesn't change the past. I can't help you," I said firmly, and then I hung up the phone. Before I turned 10, my childhood was full of love and laughter. My parents and I lived happily in our small rented house. My mom was a joyful and kind person, and she filled our days with warmth and our nights with stories and dreams. My dad used to be playful and caring, spending evenings playing games with me or teaching me about the world. Our home felt like a happy place where every day was an adventure and every night a sweet dream. But our happy life ended suddenly when my mom passed away unexpectedly. The house that was once full of laughter and love became silent, filled only with memories. I remember walking through the rooms, each one a reminder that she was gone. The loss was too much to bear, not just for me, but for my dad too, who had lost the love of his life. But to my surprise and confusion, his grief seemed to fade quickly. Just a few months later, he brought home Marissa, a woman who was going to play a big role in our lives. I remember the day he introduced her, a day that changed my childhood forever. "Anna, this is Marissa. She's going to be staying with us," my dad said one evening. His voice didn't have the warmth I was used to hearing. I looked at Marissa, hoping to see some kindness or friendliness in her, but I found none. She seemed imposing, and her gaze was cold and calculating from the very first moment. I felt a change in the air, a shift that filled me with a sense of dread I couldn't explain. "Hello, Anna," Marissa said. Her voice was smooth but lacked real emotion. Her smile didn't comfort me, it seemed to hide something sinister. In the days that followed, the house felt different, as if the walls themselves were shrinking away from her presence. The happy memories of the past seemed to fade, replaced by a lingering unease that settled everywhere. I kept looking at Marissa, trying to find something nice or kind about her, but her every look and gesture seemed filled with an unspoken hostility. It became clear that she wasn't here to fill the void my mother had left, but to create a new story where I didn't belong. As I watched her move around our home, a home that once felt safe and happy, I couldn't shake the feeling that her arrival marked the start of something bad. The way she looked at me with eyes that seemed to hide more than they showed made me worry about the future. After Marissa arrived, it felt like I was living in a nightmare I couldn't escape. The house, once filled with my mother's laughter and love, now felt cold and unwelcoming. Marissa's presence cast a shadow over everything, turning even simple daily routines into struggles. One morning, as I sat down for breakfast, I noticed my food tasted unusually salty. "Marissa, did you put too much salt in this?" I asked hesitantly. "Oh, did I? It must have been a mistake. Just eat it, Anna." Don't be so picky, she replied, her tone dismissive and almost mocking. The incidents became more frequent and mean-spirited. I remember finding my clothes ruined after they were washed. Marissa, my clothes are all faded. What happened? I asked one day, holding up my favorite dress, now discolored and unwearable. She glanced at it and shrugged nonchalantly. Maybe the washing machine is acting up, or perhaps it's time you stop wearing such childish clothes. I felt a surge of frustration but knew arguing would only make things worse. Feeling helpless, I turned to my dad, hoping he would see through her act. Dad, Marissa is ruining my things. She's always mean to me, I said one evening, my voice trembling with anger and sadness. But my dad's reaction was not what I had hoped for. Anna, you're just imagining things. Marissa is trying her best to fit into our family. Stop causing trouble, my dad said firmly, and his words hurt deeply. Every day felt like a struggle, dealing with Marissa's hostility and my dad's indifference. The home that used to be a safe haven now felt like a prison. I began spending more time in my room, trying to escape the constant tension. Living in that unhappy house made me feel alone and misunderstood. The safety and happiness that once filled our home were replaced by fear and anxiety. I missed the past when my mom's smile could brighten up the whole room, so different from the darkness that now filled every corner. Living with Marissa became a daily challenge of avoiding her and putting up with her cruelty. Her hostility towards me started with small things like pinching my arm or twisting my stomach, always in places I could hide under my clothes. The pain was sharp and a constant reminder of how helpless I felt. I started coming up with ways to avoid her, always being careful about where she was in the house. I would take long routes to my room or wait until she was busy before I moved around. Even with these efforts, there were times when she caught me off guard, and those moments always ended in pain. One day, while I was quietly reading in the living room, Marissa walked in and, for no reason, pinched my arm hard, her nails digging into my skin. I winced in pain but kept myself from crying out. She looked at me with a cold, smug smile before walking away. During one of Grandma's rare visits, she noticed how I was moving cautiously and flinching whenever Marissa's voice echoed through the house. Anna, is everything okay at home? Grandma asked, sounding worried. I looked at her, wanting to tell her the truth but afraid and wanting to protect her from worry. Yes, Grandma, everything's fine, just a lot of schoolwork, I lied, forcing a smile. She seemed unsure but didn't press further. I felt guilty for lying to her but couldn't stand the thought of causing her any stress. That evening, as Grandma was leaving, I saw Marissa watching from the window with a satisfied look on her face. It was clear she enjoyed having control over me, that she could hurt me and get away with it. Her smug expression was a clear sign that she saw herself as the one in charge and me as a powerless victim in her cruel game. I went to my room, feeling trapped in a cycle of abuse and silence. The physical pain from Marissa's pinches and twists was tough, but the emotional pain was even worse. School was my escape, a place where I could briefly forget the misery at home. But even at school, the shadows of my home life began to follow me. Mrs. Thompson, my kind-hearted teacher who always encouraged us, noticed something was wrong. One day, as I handed in my homework, she gently took my wrist and saw the bruises on my arm. Anna, what happened here? These look like bruises, she said, sounding worried. I quickly pulled my arm back, covering the bruises with my sleeve. It's nothing, Mrs. Thompson. I fell while playing. I lied, not meeting her eyes. Mrs. Thompson didn't seem convinced. Anna, if something is wrong or if someone is hurting you, you can tell me. It's important to speak up, she said, looking at me with concern. I wanted to tell Mrs. Thompson everything about Marissa and how I lived in fear, but I couldn't find the words. Instead, I forced a smile and said, Really, Mrs. Thompson, I'm fine. It was just a silly accident. She looked at me thoughtfully, then nodded slowly. Okay, Anna, but remember, my door is always open. You're not alone, she said with a reassuring smile. I nodded, feeling a lump in my throat. Her kindness made it even harder to keep up the pretense that everything was okay. As I walked home, Mrs. Thompson's words echoed in my mind. I felt grateful for her concern, but also deeply lonely, carrying my burdens alone. The idea of telling the truth about my home life was frightening. I worried about what Marissa might do if she found out I had talked to someone. That night at dinner, I was quiet, lost in thoughts about Mrs. Thompson's offer to help. Marissa noticed my silence. Why so quiet tonight, Anna? Cat got your tongue? She asked, her tone mocking. I just shook my head and kept eating, trying to make myself as small and invisible as possible. After dinner, lying in bed, I felt overwhelmed by my situation. Mrs. Thompson's concern showed me that people cared, but I was still too afraid to speak up. I was stuck between wanting to tell someone and fearing what Marissa might do if she found out. The day Mrs. Thompson decided to involve my father was filled with anxiety for me. I sat nervously in the principal's office, worried about how my father would react. When he finally arrived, he looked stern and embarrassed. "What's going on, Anna? Why did the school call me here?" he asked sharply as he walked in. I looked at Mrs. Thompson, hoping for support. Trying to steady my voice, I said, "Dad, Mrs. Thompson saw. She saw the bruises, feeling his intense gaze on me. Before I could explain more, he interrupted, his anger clear. "Bruises? What are you talking about? Are you making up stories again?" Mrs. Thompson spoke up, her voice calm but firm. "Mr. Smith, I'm worried about Anna. The bruises on her arm don't seem accidental. We need to look into this." My father's face grew red with anger. "She's perfectly safe at home. Anna, are you spreading lies about our family?" he asked, clearly disappointed in me. The tears I had been holding back started to fall. "It's not lies, Dad. Marissa, she's been hurting me." I finally told the truth, but he looked completely shocked. "Marissa? That's absurd. She's been nothing but kind to you. I won't let you accuse her like this," my father said. "But Dad, it's the truth," I cried, trying to make him believe me. He stood up abruptly, losing patience. "That's enough. Tell Mrs. Thompson you made it all up." I turned to Mrs. Thompson and repeated his words. She nodded but didn't say anything. When we got home, my father locked me in my room without another word. Through the door, I could hear Marissa's voice, pretending to be concerned. "I told you she's just seeking attention," she said. I sat on my bed, feeling completely alone and hopeless. The one person I thought I could always rely on had turned away from me. My room, which used to be my safe place, now felt like a prison. I lay there, thinking about everything that had happened. The physical pain from Marissa was hard, but the real hurt came from being disbelieved and punished by my own father. It was a harsh realization that the person who was supposed to protect and love me was now causing me the most pain. The days I spent locked in my room were some of the darkest I'd ever known. Feeling trapped and alone, I knew my only hope was my grandmother. She was always kind and loving, but I had never wanted to burden her with my troubles. One evening, when I was sure Marissa and my father were busy, I gathered the courage to call my grandmother. My hands were shaking as I dialed her number. "Hello," her familiar, warm voice answered. "Grandma, it's me, Anna," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "Anna, my dear, how are you?" she asked, with genuine care in her voice. Tears filled my eyes as I said, "Grandma, I need help. Can I come and stay with you for a while?" There was a pause on the other end. "What's wrong, Anna? Did something happen?" I took a deep breath and let the words spill out. "It's Marissa. She's been hurting me, and Dad won't believe me. I don't know what to do." I could hear my grandmother's concern as she quickly said, "Of course, dear, come right over." The next day, my grandmother arrived. She was small, but her presence was powerful. She confronted my father with surprising strength. "John, I'm taking Anna with me. She's not safe here," she said firmly. My father, surprised, tried to argue. "Mom, you can't just take her. She's my daughter." "Your daughter whom you're failing to protect," she shot back. "I won't stand by and let her suffer." Marissa tried to stop her. "She's just a child making up stories. You can't believe her over us." Grandma looked at Marissa with a steely gaze. "I can see a scared child when I see one. Anna is coming with me. If you try to stop me, I'll take this to the authorities." Seeing that he was outmatched, my father didn't argue anymore. As I packed my things, I noticed Marissa's defiant look change to one of defeat. Leaving the house with my grandmother, I felt a huge weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in months, I felt safe. The car ride to Grandma's was quiet, but her presence was comforting. When we arrived, she turned to me and said, "You're safe now, Anna. You don't have to worry anymore." In Grandma's house, I found the love and security that had been missing from my life. It was a place where I could heal and regain my strength. The difference between her warm home and my father's cold house was huge. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I could finally breathe, free from the fear and anxiety that had taken over my life. Years had passed since I left my father's house to live with my grandmother. Her home had been a safe haven full of love and healing. But time brought change, and my beloved grandmother passed away, leaving the huge emptiness. At her funeral, my father and Marissa showed up. Their faces showed fake sadness and hidden excitement. They seemed more interested in what they might get from her passing than truly mourning her loss. After the funeral, when we gathered at Grandma's house, Marissa quickly made her move. "Well, Anna, I guess you'll need to find a new place to live now. This house and everything in it belongs to your father now," she said, her voice barely hiding her pleasure. My father nodded, looking around as if planning what to do with the house. I couldn't help but smile, which seemed to confuse them. "Actually, you're wrong," I said confidently, surprising them with my tone. "What do you mean?" my father asked, looking confused. I took a deep breath, enjoying the moment. "Grandma left a will. She left the house and a lot of money to me," I explained, watching their faces go from confused to shocked. "But you're just a child. I'm your father. I should be in charge of your inheritance," my father stammered, clearly feeling entitled. Marissa added, her voice sharp, "Yes, until you're of age, your father will manage your property." Their reactions were almost funny. "You didn't even bother to wish me a happy birthday. I turned 18 a month ago. I'm legally an adult now. I make my own decisions," I said firmly, enjoying the look of realization on their faces. My father's expression changed from shock to anger and then to a desperate plea. "Anna, you can't do this. We're your family," he said, trying to convince me. I looked at them, old memories flooding back. "You stopped being my family a long time ago," I said calmly. Marissa stepped forward, now begging, "Please let us stay in the house. We have nowhere else to go. We didn't renew our lease." I shook my head. "This is my house now. You'll have to find somewhere else to live." As they left, I felt years of pain and neglect lift from my shoulders. I stood in the house that was now mine, a house full of my grandmother's love, and felt a sense of closure. The past still echoed in the house, but the future was mine to shape. I sat there with my phone in hand, feeling a mix of emotions, anger, betrayal, and a sense of injustice. But through it all, there was also a feeling of strength, a reminder of the resilience that had helped me through the toughest times.